Hey everyone, Jordan Rosenberg, Bierman Law. Today I'm joined with one of the top producing real estate brokers in Chicago, Ben Lalez of the Compass team. I'm here to talk a little bit about the real estate market, how things have gone, and some issues that we can kind of integrate between the divorce realm and the real estate realm. So thank you, Benny, for joining me.
My name is Ben, but yes.
You got it.
Happy to be here.
No problem. We did a podcast probably May of 2020, right? Peak COVID.
Yeah, hysteria.
And we were at home. We were kind of just getting used to this whole work from home environment and kind of staying home. We did a podcast of like a real estate update and kind of how the real estate market would be affected and your thoughts about how the pandemic and everything would affect rates and buyers and selling and the whole process. And so one of the things that we talked about, which I recall, was I'd asked you a question. I said, what do you think things look like moving forward? Are people going to buy bigger houses to account for working at home and the extra space? So bring me to now, Ben.
Yeah.
Give me sort of the 30,000 foot overview of what's happened since we've had that podcast to right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be characterized as the most interesting time in, modern real estate history, because in the small span that we've really had, call it March 2020, and we're approaching March 2023.
Right.
So we have almost an exact three-year snapshot. And I don't know if it has ever been quite as dramatic a shift between seller's market, buyer's market, seller's market, buyer's market. So peak COVID hysteria. And in my world, that was probably March or April of 2020.
Yeah.
So what happened was people all froze up. Everyone took, that wait and see attitude. And that was your first opportunity if you were a buyer, where buyers controlled everything.
Yeah.
Because when we mean hysteria in the real estate market, everyone wanted to, point to 2008. Like, this is a disaster. I'm never going to be able to sell my home again. So if you were a buyer and if you frankly had the balls to put your money down and go buy something,
right,
you could dictate what occurred. That was COVID discount. So when we look back at data and we're like, everyone wants to think that in 2020, and this happened later on, that prices should have gone up dramatically. But when we look at data and we see something that closed in April of 2020 for, $70,000 under asking, we call that the COVID discount. So you had that small stretch of COVID discount.
But that didn't last very long, right?
No, that was like a small snapshot in time. And
right.
The people who had guts, they really saw a benefit there.
Yeah.
And we had a few people, we were one of the largest buying teams in the city here.
Yeah.
We had somewhere in the neighborhood of 60 deals under contract at the time.
Yeah.
We actually didn't lose a single deal. So we had people wait it out and they kind of stayed where they were at to, just stuck in there.
So when did the tide turn from that little window
Yeah.
to, I think, what you call hysteria, which from my perspective, it was just bananas. And there was lines out the door for open houses. It was just madness.
So we're only going to fast forward a little bit to call it May.
Okay.
So what occurred was sellers really tightened up. They were really scared. There were people who didn't want to leave their homes.
Yeah.
So like people weren't moving. So how that manifested was a real kind of intense decrease in supply. There was no supply. At the same time, people were all bunched together. People were living shoulder to shoulder, and they were just ready to get out of the house before something terrible happened.
Right.
Prices went through the roof.
Right.
And we, that was our first glimpse. I would argue June of 2020, 18 offers on a home. So obviously, seller-friendly environment.
Yeah.
And from there, we had some seasonal ups and downs, but from May 2020 to, I would say, June 2021, mass hysteria.
Madness.
Yeah. So sellers, that was when we had seller love letters, waiving inspection, waiving appraisals, like offering, the joke in real estate was offering your firstborn with your, with the contract to make sure that you secured it.
Right.
Absolute insanity.
Yeah.
Finally, you get, we had like a small little break in, December of 2021 where things felt balanced.
Yeah.
Right. Where, things weren't going crazy. And then comes 2022, vaccines are out. people start to see a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, the real estate tunnel.
Yeah.
And now the Fed wants to get involved.
Right.
And now is when they start playing with interest rates a little bit. And, we can kind of 2022 had times where sellers were at an advantage, had times where buyers were at a small advantage.
Yeah.
As we, approached the end of 2022, interest rates start creeping up. Buyers firmly in the driver's seat, end of 2022, early part of 2023, which is where, we were at right now. Buyers had a really strong advantage in January and February, and now we're starting to see it shift. As buyers come back out, demand is increasing, and, sellers kind of hold the baton right now, and they're, holding on to it strong.
In terms of like frequency, in terms of, and for our viewers, like right now,
Yeah.
if someone were to go look at an open house, I'm hearing stories just from my friends, from my clients, that it's actually pretty competitive.
Super competitive right now, depending where you are.
And I guess, is there a distinction between, and what I'm finding is the interest rates obviously are super high,
Yep.
and that really deters people, I think, from getting a loan and buying a house. But what I'm finding, at least again with my clients and with people I know, is that the higher end market doesn't really seem affected. Where it's more, I would say, and I would say the 500 and under homes maybe are being affected a little more. But I mean, give me some insight on that.
Yeah. So in general, whenever someone asks me what I would categorize as like a broad question, I always like to point out that real estate is like hyper local.
Yeah.
Literally, are you talking about River North, Logan Square, Northbrook,
Interesting.
Glenview,
Yeah.
Western Springs? Because each market, they act independently.
Yeah.
And the people in those markets will react differently to, interest rates, supply and demand imbalances.
Yeah.
So it's a tough question.
Let's go just the suburbs and what the real estate landscape looks like now. And then give me just, I'd say the west of the highway is what I would say.
In the
give
city.
me the Bucktown,
Yeah.
Wicker Park, Logan Square area.
Yeah, two areas that we have a hyper specialty in.
Yeah.
So in the suburbs, I would tell you that if you're looking especially under 800,000, but even like under $1 million, there's just no supply.
Yeah.
And the supply that, is out there is not the most desirable.
And why is that? I mean,
Yeah.
are you finding that people are just launching their houses at astronomical listing prices and they're just, what's the phenomenon
So I think
there?
it's less that, though we are seeing some of that. I think the biggest reason, and I think this is the reason why we won't see like this bullshit, real estate drop that everyone, wants to,
Right.
Yeah, wants to point to. A third of the nation refinanced into a sub 3% interest rate.
Which is wild.
Yeah. So in effect, what the government did by doing that was they removed a third of national inventory for quite some time.
Right.
So you have like good product, and these are the products. And when I say product, I mean like a house. So you have those suburban families, they're just like, F it, this is the forever home.
Right.
So you locked up that inventory
Yep.
for, maybe 10 years longer than they would have ordinarily held it. So that inventory is never coming back, Jordan.
That plays, I guess to your point is that now inventory's low.
Yeah.
And so in those areas where people are locked in and, there was a mass exodus to the suburbs, I
Yep.
think, the phenomenon would be that there's not a lot of inventory because people are locked into their homes at low interest rates and they don't want to sell them.
This is actually a first good switch into, the joining of real estate and obviously divorce.
Absolutely.
And so now what are going to be those instances where people let go of that sub 3% interest rate?
Yeah.
One of them obviously is going to be divorce,
Right.
because you can't, there's divorce, job change, growing family, shrinking family. Some of those things are, those things are never going to change.
Right.
The people that we, who aren't going to put their homes on the market are the Jordan and Jamies with 2 children.
Right.
That got their home, they lived there. It was going to be their forever home, and you may have moved because you wanted a slight upgrade, a slight downgrade, a bigger yard.
Yeah.
No, you're there forever.
Yeah.
But I think an interesting question is, and I'll put it back on you, starting in 2020, we've talked.
Yeah.
The divorce, is market the right word?
Sure.
Yeah, the divorce market has been interesting. Tell me, and put a little real estate spin on it for me.
Yeah.
But take me through the pandemic up until now and what we've seen with the divorce market.
let me kind of start backwards. So right now, you asked the question, you said where, how does a low interest rate family who's stuck in their place, I mean, what are they supposed to do? Or what are the circumstances that they leave? Well, obviously in a divorce, one family becomes two. And so the issue of the house is always massively significant in every case.
Yep.
Not only because it's familiar, it's a grounding space for kids, it's something that there's a large emotional component to it as well.
Huge sentimental and
Huge.
actual value.
Huge. And so a lot of times, right now, I would very much urge my clients to say, look, if you're planning on moving at some point in the future, whether it be 5 years, whether it be 10 years, do it now. Get into your own space, make it your own, start new, start a new chapter. Let's get rid of sort of that past. It doesn't mean it was bad. It just means let's move forward and find your own space. Now, we're in situations where in a divorce, one party either buys the other party out, meaning there's a cash settlement or there's some other property distribution to offset the equity in the house, or it's sold. And if mom wants the house and dad wants the house and they can't reach an agreement, then it's a forced sale.
Gotta sell it, yeah.
Right? So there's a lot of situations now where both people are like, look, I can afford this house, right, on my own income or with my support payments. I want to be here. I have a low interest rate. It's a good investment. I want the house. And the other partner says, well, no, I'm in the same situation. I want the house.
It's interesting through my eyes, low supply, high demand.
There you go. Right. So that's a big conundrum is, do you buy the other person out? And if so, is someone going to pay a premium?
Are the people just quit claiming their interest over to the other party and because from a lending standpoint, if two people are on title and two people are on the mortgage,
Yep.
how's that kind of taken care of?
That's a great question. And that's a very common question that I get from my clients as well. So it depends how the house is originally titled. And if it's in both of their names, then yeah, a simple quit claim deed usually takes it out of joint tenancy into, tenants.
But lender is going to have to qualify a single person as opposed to using both incomes, which I'm assuming becomes a challenge for you.
That's right, all the time. And it depends, again, who's refinancing. There's usually a transfer through a title and then some requirement within a certain period of time to refinance. And if there's somebody who's receiving support, that person has to receive at least 6 months of support in order to qualify at their new income to qualify at that rate to get a refinance. But yeah, I mean, if it's something where take the non-earner of the family who's receiving support and that person wants to keep the house and there's a deal structured where, let's just call it he's keeping the house. That person would have to refinance using their support and whatever
So they're going to lose that interest rate anyway.
They would lose that interest rate. Exactly.
Oh, so the interest rate becomes a little less of a binding factor to the home. Is that correct or no?
Again, it depends who it's titled to. But yeah, I mean, if it's in the situation that I was readily thinking of, it's somebody who's only on the mortgage and they're both on title, so they don't have to refinance. And if that's the other situation, but you're right. You're absolutely right. If you have to refinance anyway, you lose that rate.
Are you hoping my clients get divorced?
No. I'm very happily married. I've got 2 great kids. I believe in the institution of marriage. I'm just here to help people out through a tough time.
Got it. In the, hopefully undesired moment that, you do have to get divorced, how can you help set up real estate in such a way where it doesn't become as problematic, or is there a way?
I really don't think there is a way, to be honest. And I think everybody always wants to ask me, how do I divorce plan? How do I set myself up? Can I do things surreptitiously to plan?
No.
It never works like that. And at the end of the day, it's truly a math problem. And it's ostensibly, if you keep the house, how does it work? If your partner keeps the house, how does that work? There really is no good way, to be honest. But one thing I want to go back to, and what we were talking about earlier, is you mentioned something about how people have, they were stuck inside with each other through the pandemic. And obviously that affects my business tremendously because when people are fighting,
more divorce,
right?
Yep.
So what I've noticed, which is very interesting, is through the pandemic since 2020 to now, things have changed in the divorce landscape. Court is now, instead of in person, it's on Zoom.
Really?
So it's a lot easier to be mean to somebody when you're a face on a
camera.
computer screen rather than when you're looking them in the face like I'm doing now. So that, I think, coupled with the fact that everybody kind of loses their outside influences and is stuck in the house, has increased conflict in divorce tremendously.
You're saying messier divorces.
Way messier. And I'm not saying the number of people are getting divorced is higher. I'm saying that people are fighting about the lamp because they don't have that outlet to go play paddle and do whatever they need to do, right? So it's everybody's fixated on the immediate and, well, he wins and she loses, and it's a very zero-sum game, which I've noticed, which has been a very difficult transition, I think, for a lot of people.
My assumption was that there were more divorces during, lockdown and kind of, when we had to stay at home. Is that true?
It kind of goes back to that last point I made. I think people were scared of the uncertainty and to say, look, there's enough uncertainty out there with the pandemic and where am I going?
Divorce.
Let's not add this massive calamity to our life and this disruption. But, again, at the same point, the court cases that were going on and the divorces that were happening got wackier.
Oh, wow.
And so that's what I'm saying is conflict, I think, is tremendously increased. And so I think this whole transition, what I think, the prophecy that I'll credit you with when we did our first podcast and saying people were buying larger homes because of the thought that they would be stuck at home has sort of come true from my perspective. And so that phenomenon with everybody at home, again, bigger real estate purchases, I think, more real estate purchases, people moving to larger places, and there's an urgency to move with the lower interest rate. And as a corollary, more conflict because everybody's in the home.
So you're a good example. You work from home X number of days a week, right? 1 day a week?
Maybe.
And Jamie works from home.
Jamie's a couple days a week, so 3-4 days a week.
My wife, who used to be full-time in the office, is full-time at home.
Right.
So I think it's yet to be seen exactly how it'll shake out in the real estate world and like what the needs for spaces, both indoor and outdoor, but also we're talking about huge shifts in the way people live, right? Which are going to have lasting ramifications across, many subsects of the economy, lifestyle, et cetera. So I don't think, either of us know.
Yeah. And I mean, even the difference between commercial real estate and residential real estate, I mean, there had to have been a massive pendulum swing over to the strength in the residential market through the commercial market. I work in the Loop, Clark and Randolph, and, for a while it was a ghost town. And I mean, even now, our office is not at full capacity, and there's other offices that, there's nobody there.
Commercial vacancy, especially office vacancy, is it's a real problem.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the right person to really speak on, what the solutions are or even where I think it's going.
But I guess the question to you, Ben, is and just going back to this prophecy is have you noticed people stretching themselves, buying larger homes than they believe they can afford because they want that extra space? And by the way, it's a tough dichotomy also because people could afford a lot more with a lower interest rate. Is that continuing, and where is that going?
So the way I'll answer that question is, so typically like the base model, right? Let's think about cars, like what the base model has always been, has always been like the 2-bed, 2-bath garage spot with for $500,000. That's been the base model.
Yeah.
So if anything, the way I would answer it is the base model has increased. So like the base model is now the 3-bed or like the 2+ den people always like to.
Right.
And the challenge is that given the interest rate environment, people still want it for, $550.
Right.
So if you take a look at the other end of that spectrum is, those people who had 1-beds, they're really challenging to move right now.
Yeah.
There's fewer buyers for them. And like the sellers, are kind of stuck because, everyone, right?
Wants a
even
bigger place.
A lawyer, right? You need who goes into the office all the time. You still need a space to work from home.
Absolutely.
I work from here 5 days a week, but on the weekends, I want to get away from my children and tuck myself into a corner so that I can get that hour and a half in of work.
Absolutely. Where
are you going to do that? So the 1-bedroom spaces are a challenge. Now, when you take a look at, that next level up with a single family home, and you're the perfect example, the 3-bedroom usually isn't enough anymore, right? So you have 2 children, you have one for, you and Jamie, 2 bedrooms for your kids.
Yep.
Not enough.
Right.
You need that 4th space.
Right.
Which
it's a utility, just a utility. And where it's like, it's a workout room, office, guest bedroom. It's
you
a
ask it
utility
to do everything.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't as needed in the past, but like having that additional living space, like especially for kids. The big challenge and what we're seeing right now is ultimately in the past, what that would mean was increasing your budget. But right now, that's not necessarily a possibility given, I just got a pre-approval in my inbox this morning for a client who are, they're buying for $900,000. They have high credit scores, it's a consultant and a doctor, and their interest rate on their pre-approval is 6.75, 6.75, right? So while they, I think, need to be in that $1.35 million house, I think that's where they're going to be happy for the long run.
Right.
They're looking at 950. So like desires, and I think this is probably right in your wheelhouse, like desires and financial circumstances don't always line up.
Right.
And I think that is what people have had to come to realize right now is given, interest rates are where they are, supply is where it is. You don't get to choose what happens to the market. Like you have to be able to dance in the market that you're in.
And that's the old adage, can't play the market.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the biggest challenge is people don't want to think of for whatever reason, real estate, people want to think of it as something other than a market.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think it's to your point, it's like it holds such a sentimental value.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And it means so much to people both on the buy side and the sell side.
Right.
That they can't think of it as like a car, right?
Yeah,
the car market
of course.
is crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
slow.
People's lives are built there. I mean, they have 20 years full of stuff there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, even in situations that I was finding it's like, going back to that period where hysteria, right? I mean, you list your house for $100,000 more than you think you can get for it, and you're actually getting offers for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it makes sense at that point during a divorce. You're like, look, if I'm going to sell my house, might as well be right now because we're going to get top dollar for it.
Yep.
What I want to go back to, Ben, is what I would call the high-end market. How would you categorize, like, what's that price range? And I want to know, like, right now, if somebody said, look, I'm in the base model and I've got some opportunities where I can go up. I can, what is that market specifically?
We kind of touched on the suburbs, so now we're going back to where we're sitting right now, the Bucktowns, the Wicker Parks, West Towns, et cetera, which is our bread and butter. Shameless plug. Nobody sells more of that product in the city than us. So
True that.
Thanks, man.
There you go.
So that product, there's enough of.
Yeah.
So right now, a $500,000 2.2, right? Because that was our historic base model.
Yep.
There's enough.
Yeah. And so I guess to that end, so one of the things that at least I was concerned about, and I know a lot of my clients are, when they get a divorce and somebody has to move and the kids are being moved from different houses, is school districts.
No doubt, yeah.
And so obviously the real estate, at least from my own personal experience, that's in better school districts is more desirable. Would you generally subscribe to that?
Oh, yeah, almost. It's a chicken or the egg. It's usually, the real estate comes first, higher taxes, gets better schools.
Got it.
Yes.
And so one of the problems I see sometimes is, especially with young children, and if they're in public schools, there's a discussion and dispute about where the child goes to school.
Yep.
And so at least in the city, you have a different conundrum than if you're in the suburbs, because usually, they're commensurate and it's just different neighborhood schools.
Yeah. There are worse schools in the city.
Yeah. In the city, it's different. So I'd be interested from your perspective, how you see the school district conversation come up in a buy or sell process. And is that a big selling point for you? Like, how significant is that in the process?
So most of our clients, kind of just given the length of time I've been in the business, and we primarily work with like friends first, and if we want to be completely honest about it, I haven't had too many 45 to 55-year-old clients. It's mostly millennials. So those conversations are just now starting.
Got it.
But like even you right now, the Jordans and Jamies of the world.
Yeah.
Right now, it doesn't quite matter as much unless you are looking at your 7-year house.
Right.
Most people I'm working with are trying to get into that starter home 3 to 5 years. And I guess the way I would answer your question is like from a data perspective, schooling matters way less up until age 5 then does your like home structure.
Yeah.
So it's okay to put your kid in a less than perfect public school for their, really all we're talking about is 2 years.
Right.
And then finding that more permanent solution. And then you're going to be, really doing your due diligence on, ultimately, are we going to go to, the selective enrollment program?
Right.
Or look at the highest quality public schools, which unfortunately are segmented into certain neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But it definitely makes a difference, just not quite with our clientele yet.
Got it. Let me transition to another thing that you
Yeah.
said. One thing I wanted to touch on, Ben, that you brought up was the 3 to 5 year home concept.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the issues that I deal with is when somebody's moving out of the house, obviously there's another acquisition of a piece of real estate, whether that be a lease, whether that be a buy,
Yep.
whether that be, are we literally just buying what I can immediately afford, or am I stretching myself a little bit? Even if I don't know exactly how much money I'll have after the divorce,
Right.
where do I go? From my perspective, I always advise my clients, I said, look, in the middle of a divorce where there's that uncertainty, get yourself into like a short-term lease. At least that's best for your divorce case because it's temporary, you can terminate it. But from a realistic perspective, do you have an opinion based on that?
Of course. So you kind of said it yourself. One family becomes 2 families.
Right.
So then let's say I'm dealing with the woman, right?
Sure.
And she's going to be sharing custody. What I would do is look at her situation in a vacuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to be having your kids this amount of time. They're going to be going to school. You need, let's take a look at it from like a very simple perspective. What are your needs? How many beds? How many baths? Et cetera.
Right.
And then in a very, again, simple manner, let's try to understand, and we can talk to your divorce attorney, whether that's you or their divorce attorney, right?
Yeah.
And have a conversation about where we think your finances are going to land. And then you're going to have to go through a more typical pre-approval process with a lender. I think that's where the due diligence on my end kind of stops, because in many circumstances, the lender is going to say, well, we don't know where her finances are going to shake out,
Right.
and we're going to have to wait.
Yeah.
And then, we shift into the lease.
Right.
Now, if it is more evident, or let's say she has income that is stable and, nothing's going to change that, and
Sure.
she has money that is, set aside, and we know she's going to have at least, X for a down payment, then we can kind of treat this whole circumstance, quote unquote, normally. But there's just that one additional wrinkle that we're going to have to, deal with. And it's not dissimilar from people that we work with that are, changing jobs and are quote unquote unemployed for, 2-3 months before
Right.
they get their new gig. Mm-hmm. Or we deal with clients who are moving into and out of the country and those issues. So it's just like another set of circumstances that we have to manage.
Yeah. And, it's interesting when you talk about that, I would say in a vacuum, using your word, is there's so much else to consider, especially in a divorce setting where, a lot of issues and conflicts arise from the move. So a lot of lawyers, I think, would say if you have children, don't leave the house unless you have a firm court-ordered parenting schedule. And the reason, and everybody's clawing at their necks trying to get out of the house because they're uncomfortable and they live with their soon-to-be divorced spouse, and it's like, when can I move? Right. And so everybody's, I want to get in a rental. It's fully furnished. I don't care. I'm out. I don't care. My advice to you always would be stick it out. If something cataclysmic happens, obviously you call us or you call the police. But
you're saying live in the house with the spouse that you're trying to get separated from.
I think
as long as you can.
I think so. So long as the circumstances, with a big caveat.
Move into the basement.
Move into the basement. Right. Separate yourself within the house. 2 ships passing in the open night. Try to keep a nice, at least appropriate acumen for your children.
Cordial.
Be cordial. Do your thing. Be respectful. And that's most cases. In the cases where you are feeling unsafe, or that's that's obviously a completely different story where,
get out.
From your perspective, oh my God, stay in the house with your soon-to-be. Of course it's uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do that.
Sure.
But if you're unsafe, that's obviously a different set of circumstances. But in the normal circumstance, I think the appropriate and most measured advice would be stay in the house and make sure you have that parenting agreement, because if you move and the kids stay with that parent,
the kids are tied to the house in some degree.
Very much so.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Very much so.
There you go. Real estate and divorce.
There we go.
Kids are tied to the house.
Kind
Makes
of.
sense. But yeah, because that's their home base. That's
their
where they
spot.
feel safe.
And of course, the whole concept of what you're doing with the kids in divorces, it's this whole buzzword called best interests and what is in their best interest. And so stability, routine, consistency, sleeping in their own bed at night, waking up in the same bed to start
Going to the
school.
same school.
Going to the same school, right. So you try to mimic that as much as you possibly can through the process and through negotiations. And I think that's what judges try to do as well.
So kind of putting a bow on divorce and real estate, how is the divorce market? It's really interesting. The most common question I get is, how's the market?
Yeah.
I'm going to put it back on you. How's the market?
Love that. Never been asked that question, being totally honest.
Really?
Yeah.
Great.
And
Shoot it
what's
from the
the
hip.
landscape? I mean, I think that there's these stats that get thrown around that 50% of couples ultimately get divorced. And that's a high stat, and it's uncomfortable because that statistically means, one of us in this room is probably going to get divorced. So knock on wood, won't happen.
So from a national perspective,
Sure.
I think that 50%, I think it is true.
Yeah.
So, but just with like with anything, I'm sure there's nuance.
Yeah.
So I wanted to look at like income levels, education levels, et cetera.
Yeah.
So both partners have a college degree. The divorce rate goes down
Did
dramatically.
you actually look into this?
I looked at it. So Megan and I have a 78% chance of staying together. I'm serious. You should look into it.
That's like a Ben Stiller, Along Came Polly risk analysis. You ran it through the formula.
I wanted to know because
Yeah.
I don't know. We don't need to get into like the politics of it, but I don't think 50% of the country also voted for Trump. You know what I'm saying? And that's really hard for me to fathom.
Right.
And I don't know. I haven't had I have had one friend who's gotten a divorce, and we're 35, and I'm sure more are coming.
Yeah.
Right. What is the statistical average age of your clients?
So here, I think backing up, that's a really, really interesting point. And I agree. And I said statistically only, right? And I think of that's, I love you, Jamie. There's no conversations about that at this point. But it is the market, so to speak. I think, going back to your question, I think it's sort of life cyclical. And so what I find is there's certain hotspots in when the tendency to get divorced is. So it's sort of right away at 0 to 3 years is a hotspot where, look, it didn't work out. We're done.
What were we doing?
What were we doing? Right.
Yeah.
And so that I think is I'll see a lot of cases with 0 to 3 marriages. The next sort of wave, I would say, is that 7 to 10 year range where, most families have 1 or 2 children. They're kind of getting into it, and, the stress of the children and life gets in the way, and that's sort of the next level of conflict. The next thing I see is sort of that 18 to 20 where kids are in college, they're now empty nesters again.
Right.
And it's what we've grown apart during this time. All we really knew was life with the kids. And now it's a little different.
We're roommates.
We're roommates.
Yeah. What are we doing here?
Right. And we've grown apart. And so, that's sort of the lifestyle, but I'll add that most divorces aren't contested. And I would say that
contested being I don't want to get a divorce.
No, I don't want to go to court and fight about stuff. And usually it's mutual.
Oh,
where,
interesting.
Look, someone brings it up, rips the Band-Aid. It's, that's a horrible conversation. You never want to have that with your spouse. But someone brings it up, the next person kind of subscribes to it and says, yeah, you know what, I guess that's appropriate.
Let's figure this out together.
And it's some amicable, meaningful discussion where it's 2 individuals can articulate what's in their best interest and for their kids. I would say 5 to 10% of my cases take up 80% of my time. So I would say that if you were contemplating that divorce, or if you're in the divorce, yes, there's all different levels of conflict, but the process doesn't have to be painstaking from my perspective.
Love it. It's an interesting transition because we wanted to talk a little bit about what it's like being, you only get paid if you make a sale.
Sure.
Right. I only get paid if I make a sale. And what it's like in Chicago being 2 entrepreneurs who only eat what they kill.
Right.
And so to speak. So you said something interesting, and I think it's probably true across most service-based businesses.
Yeah.
I'll just round it out for you. 20% of your clients take 80% of your time.
Sure.
Right. Same.
Right. Me probably being one of those clients of you.
Yeah. Fucking lawyers.
Right. Yeah.
If I could choose one profession not to work with ever
There we
again,
go.
it's lawyers. I'm married to a lawyer, so it's okay. I spend all my time with a lawyer.
There we go.
But I'm curious, your clients.
Yeah.
How do you find them primarily?
Again, great question. I'm going to ask the same thing of you because they're wildly different, but they're also kind of similar. So my mantra is I don't want you to get divorced. I'm not soliciting people saying, hey, how's your marriage?
Yeah, I am saying, hey, you should move. But.
Right, exactly. But this is not like a real estate transaction. And yes, there's some emotion behind buying a house and it's, typically happy. Mine is the opposite, where you're not trying to introduce a calamity to somebody's life and saying this catastrophe and this crisis, let me bring that on you and force you to get divorced. So I always tell my clients, I'm not here to tell you to get divorced, but here are your options. And so the way I get my clients is, it's a lot of referrals, tons of referrals. And from people I know, from my networking partners, from people I trust, they go, people come to them, say, hey, do you know somebody, friends, my former clients, and if you want to subscribe to my new Instagram handle.
I do.
Which, I'll with the...
Can we put it here?
Below.
Yes.
At J Rosenberg Family Law. I try to get, there's like that advertising component where people reach out, which is totally fine too, and they don't know where to go. And people are, other law firms are very effective in that. But it sort of runs the gamut. It's people in my life. It's people that, I'm so-and-so's sister's friend's cousin, okay.
Sure,
And, of course you kind of play the game. Well, yeah, I know, of course.
Of course I know them, yeah.
But, you do the best you can for people, and that's sort of how I do it. And it's a grind. And, a large part of, it's a service industry. You're absolutely right. I mean, just like we are.
What percentage of your time is spent kind of like, I don't know if you think of it as sales, but like lead generating, business generation versus actively working on cases that you have open?
I mean, I would say the vast majority of my time is actively working on cases that I have open. I think that it probably should swing a little bit. I agree with you, because as an entrepreneur, I mean, that's what I am. I'm an entrepreneur.
You're in sales, whether you like it or not.
Everybody's in sales.
I know, it sucks.
That's the deal.
Yeah.
So it's hard, and that comes with a certain territory, but it's meeting with people. It's, it should be higher, but it's having lunch. It's doing pizza drafts and cool stuff for the Lalez team. And that's kind of how you get your name out there. And just so it's that name recognition. I guess shifting it to you, Ben.
Yeah.
It's, I really, if I had a photographic memory, I'd ask you the exact same questions, but I guess you're crushing it. Let's just be honest.
Smoke and mirrors, but sure.
Smoke and mirrors, sure.
Yeah. Sure, it looks like it, right?
Top grossing real estate
Number
broker
7,
in Chicago.
yeah.
Number 7, but you're crushing it. And so, again, being in sales, how do you market yourself? Do you have a particular methodology that you go about, or like some specialty that you tout yourself with? And how do you get your clients?
Yeah. So I think, and I don't know how I kind of came up with this early on. It's like having two things. I don't know. Maybe I'm giving you advice. I don't know. Having two things in mind. One, what is the brand that I'm trying to convey every single time I'm communicating with someone via any medium.
Right.
So the brand that we've come up with is the approachable expert. Every time that I am putting anything out, that's who I am.
Right.
Right. And then
caveat, it's interesting because you have that contractor background.
Yeah.
And that's, at least for me, when you helped me, that was tremendously helpful for me, because it was that second level inquiry into what you're buying and what you're selling and what the pitfalls should be, and that extra look. And I mean, your team is filled with people who are like that as well. But
contracting.
Yeah, but that was huge.
So like that kind of leads into the like that expert component. So like, I want Jordan Rosenberg, literally you. I want you to have that thought. Oh, I have a question about real estate.
Right.
And feel comfortable to approach me.
Mm-hmm.
That's everything. And then the second thing is exactly who is your target. So our target is 26 to 36-year-old young professionals, usually college educated, who are financially savvy.
Yeah.
First-time home buyers or first-time home sellers. Like that's super narrow.
Yeah.
And then one layer further is we're not going after the quote like the stranger.
Right.
We're going after like I'm going after Jordan Rosenberg's college roommate.
Right.
Right. Like that. I don't know who that is. Do I know who they are? So
Maybe.
okay.
Yeah.
But like I don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So I'm going after that one tiny little circle outside of my circle. You being my circle, going right outside there.
Yeah.
That's who I'm trying to speak to.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
To me, that feels limited. And it feels like you're limiting yourself. I mean, do you feel that way?
No.
And how did you arrive at that sort of mentality?
First of all, through a ton of data and a ton of trial and error, the majority of the people that I actually work with who end up transacting feel some sort of connection to us in some capacity.
Got it.
Right. So this illusion of the stranger, like someone's going to pick up the phone, call me off of my Google page and want to buy a $2.5 million property is what we have come to view as nonsense.
Right.
But a much more realistic approach is your college. Like, hey, Jordan, who's your college roommate?
Right.
No, I'm serious. Who were they?
Adam Glass.
Oh, Adam. I know Adam.
Yeah.
Put us on a text. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like that is a much more realistic avenue.
Right.
And like, why are you sitting here? Primarily because of our big social media, arm and our reach.
Right.
Right. But that's who we're going after. Kind of strengthening the bonds that I already have.
I mean, so it's, but you do a tremendous job, I think, on social media. You've, exploded. I mean, I appreciate the modesty.
No, the perception, we're going for the perception, the amount of effort. Like if we were to turn the camera and you can see everything, the amount of effort is dramatic.
But like at least to the outside viewer, right? And I know you've poured resources and efforts into it. I mean, you have a strong social media presence.
Yeah.
So I mean, even though you're not targeting sort of the stranger so to speak,
we call them,
right? I mean, has that methodology as an entrepreneur, has that generated any leads for you? Just like DMs of hey, I'm looking. to sell?
we've so like even though we're not targeting them, we still get very excited. So there's been 9 transactions from true strangers where we can't identify. You're playing that 6 degrees of separation game. We can't find. So there's nothing there.
Right.
Yeah, I can like name them.
Right.
Like I'm working right now. Megan is Megan Peruz is her name. Megan. I hope she's watching. Like Kathy Dwan, like Connor Siegel, Spencer Metcalf. Like I know all of their names because they're so rare. They're that rare.
Right. Let me kind of transition to another point, but it's very related, and I think another point of integration between the real estate and divorce realm is: do you ever find that people are interviewing brokers, or it's one of those things where it's like, I'm bar none, I'm going with Ben, no questions asked because you came from that college roommate?
Yeah.
Or is it ever a sense of like, and I guess my
we get interviewed all the time.
Right. And
all the
so
time.
it's, to me, they're both of what we do, again, in the service industry, is at the end of the day, you're dealing with people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be that relationship and connection between who you're working with, that trust, because I mean, let's face it, right? Any real estate broker can go through the motions of buying and selling your home. Period. Any divorce lawyer could go through the motions in buying and selling your home.
On my end, no, they can't.
However,
They can pretend.
Okay.
They can't.
Tell me what you mean by that.
I won't like name names, right? But like there's 22 agents on the team. The brand new agents and the agents who haven't had the appropriate coaching, no, they're going to fuck it up.
But that's different than what I'm talking about.
Can they put keys in your hands? Yes.
Sure. And that's what I'm saying is,
can they finalize a divorce?
Somebody can putz through the process at some different, I mean, you've done well for yourself because you've developed a process and you've developed that relationship and the meaning behind effectuating the process, making it efficient, making it fun, and making it approachable as approachable experts, right?
Yeah.
So that's a different level of service. So that's why I think in the same realm as me, I think people go with me because of the same type of reasons.
Yeah.
You offer that high level of service with the resources, and there's a trust factor.
Yeah. I think for me, like, okay, to answer your question, like if God forbid Megan and I ever got divorced, you'd probably be my divorce attorney. Why? Because I trust you and I don't think you're going to like fuck me, frankly. Right. Do we get some of that where people don't interview? Yeah. But if you don't know me well enough,
right?
No, I have to hustle for that business. 50% of the time I'm being interviewed.
Oh yeah.
It's just par for the course. You want to provide a good service and you want to do right by your client. Yeah. That's what both you and I want to do.
Right.
Unfortunately, without a really exceptionally high degree of sales acumen and understanding how to, get someone to sign your retainer agreement,
right,
and to sign on the dotted line. Unless you know how to do that, you can't be that, approachable expert. You can't provide a high level of service until you get someone to agree.
Agreed. If you were to say my biggest strength, like what I do best for my clients, you, what would be like if your one sentence, one word, like this is what I do best?
I drop you into like a proven machine.
A what?
Proven machine.
Got it.
Yeah. Like, unfortunately, like we just sold your place.
Yeah.
There was some nuance there.
Right.
But like your 3-bed, 2-bath in Logan wasn't special.
Yeah.
And we know how to sell it.
I mean, plug, we put it on the market in October on a Tuesday and it was under contract on a Friday.
Yeah. So, it's just, we have the best photography.
Yeah.
We have the best media. We know how to price. We know how to write copy. We're not guessing kind of anymore.
Yeah.
And like in the past, we probably were.
Yeah.
If we're being honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think that's the plug, is like, don't go with someone who's guessing. Like they think something's going to work.
Yeah.
We did 400 transactions last year. Why?
Right.
Because we know what works.
Right.
So like go with what works.
And you've worked really hard, and everybody could tell, to get to that machine to
the
a
processes. Like the other end of what I just said, like that machine, like what am I best at? It's building machines.
Right.
And building systems and, plugging the appropriate people into those systems to make sure that they work. Yeah. Well, listen, we make mistakes all the time, but it's rare at this point.
Yeah, that's great.
Same question.
Yeah.
What specifically has been working for you aside from people know, like, and trust you?
Here's what I find is there's a lot of situations where people are currently with a lawyer that are shopping for new lawyers.
Oh, wow.
And so that's a fairly typical event in a divorce case where, I'm not happy with my lawyer, I'm looking for that. So that's when I get a lot of good feedback. I would say my thing that I do really well is I'm an over communicator, and I want to make sure that people, again, this is people's lives, right? We're not talking about a real estate transaction. We're talking about a full-blown divorce and the destruction of a family. Okay, let's be honest.
Yeah.
So it's something that you have to be able, as someone's lawyer and trusted partner, to communicate what's happening, each step of the way, and have the patience to explain to people what's happening, what this means, what the next steps look like. What's a hypothetical if this happens, if this happens, if this happens. And sometimes that's a worthwhile, exercise, but sometimes it makes people crazy. And so you have to know your limits and really manage the person in an appropriate way. So communication and individualized strategies, I think, for people is really important, because every case is different, every relationship is different, every kid is different, every parent is different. And you have to be able to take that into consideration as a lawyer.
Context is key.
Yeah. To strategize.
Business person to business person.
Yeah.
What is working right now for you? And it's interesting because I think I mean sales.
Yeah.
That's what how have you been, what is working right now to derive new business?
Yeah. I think touch. I think follow up with existing clients, proactiveness and saying, how are things going? Follow up with clients, past clients, like, hey, just wanted to check in. How are things going?
So funny.
Because then you're kind of top of mind. They appreciate the follow up. Again, this touchy experience, kind of touching them again and saying, look, what's working, what's not? How are you? How are the kids? You know their names, you know their birthdays, you know their exact financial situation. And sometimes that generates people to say, oh, I have a friend, let's punt to the friend.
It's so funny.
And I see where you're going with this. But
where do you think I'm going with it?
I know where you're going with this. And the other part is maybe something hasn't happened pursuant to an agreement that, oh, I've been meaning to reach out to you, but I didn't want to start the whole process again. Can you talk me through this? I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, because it's one word for me.
Tell me.
Same.
And
I think that's what's the most interesting thing for me. We're nearing the top of the Chicago real estate market,
sure.
right? As an operation. Mm-hmm. But ultimately it boils down to the basics. Right. And for you, and I think if we brought in, lawyer, real estate, we brought in insurance or mortgage,
any service-based industry.
Same thing.
Agreed.
We're all doing
Be
the
a human
same
being.
exact thing.
Be a human being.
Yeah. I
Care.
think the big difference is, and you kind of touched on it earlier, is how much time and effort and system are you willing to put behind cultivating those touch points?
Absolutely.
Is the key separator.
Yeah, I think you do a nice job of that. I was over at your house for a party the other day, got a beautiful blanket with the Lalez, logo on it.
That's right.
And I think you also do a nice job of, the past client appreciation dinners.
We're trying. And I think that's the thing it's a real, everything that you see is an extraordinarily heavy lift, requires immense planning.
Right. And building that system.
Yeah.
That is, and I, in all humility, probably need to get better at that. And it's hard. It's a different situation because it's, nobody wants to generally hang with their divorce lawyer. Yeah. But it's.
Why not? I hang out with you. You're on my divorce.
There's a reason for it. I would hang with my broker, but I don't know if I'd hang with my divorce lawyer.
Yeah. Ultimately, all businesses, I think, are the same. For me, what huge unlock was coaching. I get coached.
You get coached?
I coach everyone you see out there.
Right.
But I get coached by someone who is bigger, better, who has done more than me.
Yeah, that's, again, tremendous synergy with how things work as a young professional trying to make it in Chicago. I have a mentor. I've been working with him for my whole career. And
you pay him? I'm serious.
He's my boss.
Oh,
so that's the deal.
So you do sort of pay him, and they are incentivized appropriately, potentially.
Sure.
There's a difference when that person is quote unquote your employee.
Got it.
I'm paying them.
Yeah.
And they have to deliver value, or I don't pay them.
Well, it's kind of, because it's a really symbiotic relationship. You're obviously paying for service to say, I want to be coached, and that's a different mentality. It's a different mindset. But my success depends on him. His success largely depends on the work I do.
No doubt.
So you have to be, mentoring and coaching, and hey, do this, do that, do this. And on the other end of that, just like you have your team that you're coaching, I have people in my office that I'm coaching that, again, a lot of my success derives from their success. So it's all sort of the way down. So I think that the buzzword of the coach and being a leader and being appropriately delegating and creating these systems and being efficient not only benefits you as your business, but is a huge resource to all of your clients.
Thanks. So, we covered a lot. I don't know if this is my podcast, your podcast. It's a co-podcast. Maybe there's an idea there.
A quadcast.
Quadcast.
Yeah, co-podcast.
Co-podcast.
Quadcast.
Quadcast. So, we covered, how real estate plays into divorce, how divorce plays into real estate, covered a little bit of entrepreneurship. And we've never actually sat down and talked like this. I'm pretty surprised at the similarities, the intersection. And I think it was worthwhile. I learned a lot. I hope you learned a lot. But ultimately, I'm going to do a closeout, you close out.
Yeah.
So this was Jordan Rosenberg, Bierman Law partner. But if you want to get in touch with Jordan, holler at me. I'll connect you with him directly, or give us a little shameless plug here.
Sure. You can contact me directly at my direct line, 312-262-2567, or my email address, which is here.
Yes.
And it's jrosenberg@biermanlaw.com. Ben, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Absolutely.
And I think we covered a lot of very cool stuff. And what I mean by that is tremendous synergy between the real estate market, the divorce realm, me as a young professional, you as a young professional, generating business. And I think I'll use your word that we talked about before, is it was a quadcast.
Quadcast.
And it's Was it your podcast? Was it my cast? Don't know, don't care.
Doesn't matter.
But again, a lot of very cool information. I learned a lot about sort of how you work as a professional, things that you do to service your clients. I shared some of that as well about myself, the process, the divorce process, unique issues in real estate, the forecast in what's happening in the real estate market, the environment of the divorce realm.
The divorce market.
Divorce market, sure. So a lot of cool stuff. Again, thanks so much again for being here. Jordan Rosenberg, Bierman Law. Any questions about anything related to divorce, family law, paternity, prenuptial agreements, anything like that, feel free to reach out. And to contact Ben, go ahead, Ben.
Yes. Ultimately, what I always say to this is type my name into Google, Ben Lales.
There you go.
And if you can't find me, I messed up.
And if you still can't find him, even though you messed up, just reach out to me. I'll point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thanks. You got it.